Verse 31, because he has fixed a day on which he will judge the world in righteousness by a man whom he has appointed. And of this he has given assurance to all by, here it is again, raising him from the dead. Not only do we have consummation, but he throws that resurrection thing in there again. By the way, remember the resurrection thing is what made them call him names in the first place. There's his sermon. Creation, fall, redemption, consummation. That's his message. What's the impact? Now, when they heard of the resurrection of the dead, please follow this. The comment comes after they hear about the resurrection of the dead. Before he gets to Mars Hill, they call him names mainly because he's preaching the resurrection of the dead. So before he gets this opportunity, what he knows is they don't like this idea of resurrection. Now he gets the opportunity and stands before the most influential influencers in the culture. And as he stands before the most influential influencers in the culture, he preaches a message that not only calls their worldview and their worship into question, but directly calls them sinners against the God who created the world. He calls them to turn from their sin and repent, and just for extra measure before he's finished, he throws back in there the one thing that made them insult him earlier on. It's working real hard to win friends and influence people. All that other stuff was a problem. But when they heard the resurrection of the dead, some mocked, but others said, "We will hear you again about this." So Paul went out from their midst, but some men joined him and believed, among whom also were Dionysius the Areopagite and a woman named Damaris and others with him. You know what happens when you compromise and then finally get an opportunity to preach the gospel? Having compromised and sinned against God, you know what, if you preach the gospel, even if you compromise and get an opportunity to eventually preach the gospel, some are going to mock you, some will hear you further, and some will believe. You know what happens when you don't compromise and God opens an opportunity for you to preach the gospel? Some will mock you, some will listen to you further, and some will believe. So why bother compromising in the first place? Amen. Compromising is not going to save anyone. Paul says, I'm not ashamed of the gospel of Jesus Christ, because it is the power of God unto salvation for all those who believe, the Jew first and also the Greek. What's the power of God unto salvation? And that is the ultimate question. Now we get to the heart of the issue. We think that the power of God unto salvation is popularity in the culture. We believe that what God really needs is for us to be powerful and popular so that God can use our name to get the gospel out. That's why we get so inflamed and enraptured when we find out that some popular or powerful person is a Christian. Did you hear that so-and-so was a Christian? No. Well, he is. Okay. But do you realize how popular and how powerful he is and how God can use his name and his platform? Stop right there. God already has a name that is above every name, the name at which every knee will bow in heaven and on earth and under the earth. And every tongue will confess that he is Lord to the glory of God the Father. If God already has the name that's above every name, what makes you think he needs yours? God's not in the business of borrowing people's names. He may give you a name, but God's not going to borrow your name. That thinking in and of itself belittles God. I'm going to strive to make a name for myself so that through my name and my platform, I can make much of God. Read 1 Corinthians chapter 1. Paul uses the despised things, the things that are not, to shame those things that are. He uses the weak things of the world. You know what Christians ought to pray for? Oh God, make me a weak thing. Make me a weak thing.